I recently started playing through the older Halo games again, and I have to admit, I was not looking forward to Cortana. The general consensus within the Halo community is that Cortana is the worst level in Halo 3, if not one of the worst levels across the entire series. The map is confusing, all you're doing is fighting endless streams of the Flood, you've got to deal with both Cortana and Gravemind moments, and don't let me forget about... Yeah. And those are just the surface level complaints. But even with its winding corridors, obnoxious interruptions, and frustrating fights, I think that Cortana is one of the most impactful levels in the series due to its connections to Niall's philosophy and the story it tells. Here's why.
Cortana's in there somewhere.
Halo's original trilogy and spin-offs are praised often for their deep and rich story, and for the way they deal with characters by weaving and connecting real-world ideas, concepts, and metaphors into that story. And it's praised for good reason too. Themes like war, religion and faith, family, loss, and identity ground the games in reality, and show players the depth of challenges our heroes and villains must face. Identity as a theme is especially important to Halo. It transforms the story from one that's about a stoic, robotic, humanity-saving super soldier and his sidekick AI to one that is existential. No longer are the characters in Halo simply fighting for their respective causes, but they are also fighting themselves. Over the course of the story, we can see many characters struggle more and more with their identity, with who they are and what they're fighting for. They grapple with their sense of purpose, their sense of self, what it means to be who they are, what it means to be. We've watched heroes and villains stumble and falter. The reason why I bring up identity as a theme is because it's a prevalent idea within the philosophy of nihilism, specifically existential nihilism. Existential nihilism is the philosophical idea that life has no inherent meaning, value, or purpose. It suggests that, in the grand scheme of things, nothing we do truly matters, not even our own existence. This perspective can be unsettling because it challenges the foundations of why we live, work, and seek joy. If nothing holds lasting significance, why bother doing anything at all? Halo isn't just a game about war and heroics. It's a philosophical exploration of identity, despair, and purpose. And I think nowhere is this more evident than in the level Cortana. This mission asks us to grapple with deep existential questions. If life has no inherent meaning, why do we continue to fight? Can we save something, or someone, already consumed by despair? Over the course of the player's journey throughout High Charity, we are forced to follow along Cortana's own battle as she fends off the Gravemind and fights against this dread. This level isn't meant to demonstrate how we saved Cortana. This level is meant to show us how close we really got to losing her. Through its characters, level design, and dialogue, the mission explores themes of identity, despair, and the struggle for meaning, transforming what many view as a frustrating gameplay experience into one of, in my opinion, the most thematically profound levels in the series. The Flood and the Gravemind are probably the most obvious examples of representations of nihilist ideas. The Flood exists to consume, convert, and assimilate. This is a force that wiped out the Forerunners, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy at the time. If even they could not stop the Flood, what hope does anyone else have? Given enough time, the Flood can overrun entire galaxies without needing to innovate or develop technology. What if, during Cortana's stay on High Charity, she was confronted with this idea? Sure, she must know how apocalyptic a species such as the Flood is, given the data that she's been fed. Sure, she must know how statistically impossible it is to defeat them. But does she know if it's pointless? The goal of the Flood is to reproduce and spread. To do that effectively, they need to gather enough biomass to form a Gravemind. Imagine being reduced to nothing but biomass, stripped of individuality and identity. Within the framework of existential nihilism, we are all, in a sense, future Flood biomass. Our individual thoughts, actions, feelings, behaviors, relationships, characteristics that make us us, become meaningless when we confront this inevitability. Was Cortana confronted with that idea? That, in the end, it's futile to resist the Flood? That it's futile to resist the end? Speaking of Cortana, I think she is meant to represent the self. She is meant to represent that invisible part of each of us that houses our emotions, our desires, our motivations. Throughout the course of the level, we can see how Cortana gets beaten down again and again and again. We watch as she slowly loses herself. As she slowly loses herself. Have you ever had a day that just felt like everything was going wrong? Have you ever had a month that felt like everything was going wrong? Have you ever felt that maybe it's just not worth going on? Is this how Cortana felt? As an AI, Cortana still had to be programmed. As a smart AI, it's possible for Cortana to learn. If it's possible to program emotions, would despair have been programmed? Or would it have been learned? Finally, the Master Chief can be seen as a manifestation of the Übermensch, a concept introduced by Friedrich Nietzsche, the father of nihilist philosophy. The Übermensch, or Superman, is a person who represents the human ideal. This is a person who has looked at nihilism in its eyes and spat in its face. A person who defies all odds and exceeds all expectations. A person who carves out their own path in life and refuses to accept the answers to questions that terrify them. This is a person who embodies what it means to overcome. This is how we save Cortana. If nihilism is the idea that life has no inherent meaning or value, that life is without purpose, then Cortana is a physical manifestation of that idea. This level is horrifying. Bleak, constricting hopelessness permeates the level immediately. The level begins with the Chief flying into High Charity. A somber rendition of the main musical motif plays as Chief lands his banshee on a pad of flood flesh. Totally alone, the Chief drops into a nearby pit, further into High Charity, further into hell. From this point on, the only way out is through.
Cortana's in there somewhere.
Find Cortana becomes your objective. Immediately, the player is struck by how wrong everything is. This is not the High Charity the player fought through in Halo 2. The High Charity in Halo 2 was sick. This High Charity has a disease. The walls and floors are thick with flood biomass, and tendrils stretch and hang from the ceiling. Screams and cries can be heard in the distance, echoing from unseen rooms and hallways. Have you ever sat still and listened? This introduction to the level is tense and disturbing, and the rest of the level is extremely similar in terms of atmosphere. Physically, this level represents a mind that is broken and falling apart. A sense of existential dread is literally part of the level. Broken machinery and panels litter the pathways and corridors, and massive, gaping holes have been blasted through the walls of the Holy City. High Charity is no more. As you move forward, the first room transitions into a narrowing hallway, heightening the sense of unease and confinement. These tight, suffocating hallways are a recurring feature throughout the level, turning each encounter with the flood into a claustrophobic, high-stakes battle. The hallways are more than just physical barriers, though. They serve as constant reminders of the mission at hand. To reach Cortana, the player must push through seemingly endless amounts of these corridors and waves of enemies. The player reaches the reactor room. Flood biomass stretches across a chasm, forming precarious bridges, and a massive trunk of flood something is growing from the walls. The music takes on a determined tone. We know we're close. Finally, we reach Cortana. We can see flood biomass creeping closer and closer to her. While High Charity has been consumed and corrupted, Cortana has just barely managed to escape. The dialogue in this mission tells its own story and was the inspiration for this video. Immediately, the dialogue fills us with a sense of unease and worry.
Child of my enemy, why have you come? I offer no forgiveness. A father's sins pass to his son.
What's the point in being here? This battle has been fought before, eons ago. A father's sins pass to his son. It is now humanity's prerogative to destroy the flood. Previously, it was the Forerunners. The level wastes no time in confronting players with Cortana's anguish. Dropping into the first chamber, we catch our first glimpse of her, caught in a state of pain, desperation, and despair. It's not like Cortana to sob, and players are left to wonder, is this a vision from the Gravemind? Or is it a raw, unfiltered moment of her torment? Either way, it instills an urgent need to press on. Moments like these are punctuated by chilling monologues from Cortana herself, such as when the player stumbles upon a downed pelican.
I ran, tried to stay hidden, but there was no escape. It cornered me, wrapped me tight, and brought me close.
For an AI with no tangible body, the idea of being physically cornered is horrifying, suggesting her torment isn't just physical, but psychological and emotional.
Of course you came for her. We exist together now. Two corpses in one grave.
Cortana's laughter is heard during the next Gravemind moment.
A collection of lies. That's all I am. Stolen thoughts and memories.
And yet, perhaps a part of her remains.
And yet, perhaps not. This is the deep, dark, existential dread that comes with realizing how worthless and wrong and false you are. There is no Cortana without the Gravemind. There is no Cortana without despair and death. If Cortana became infected with an idea, it will never leave her. And if there is no Cortana without the Gravemind, then the player is leaving with the Gravemind too.
Can I speak with you, please? What's your name? It's very nice to meet you. You like games. So do I.
It was the coin's fault. I wanted to make you strong, keep you safe. I'm sorry, I can't.
This unnerving shift in tone mirrors the Gravemind's psychological manipulation, lulling the player into a heightened sense of discomfort as they fight through one of the toughest battles in the level yet. It was the coin's fault is a reference to Dr. Halsey and Master Chief's first meeting. When the Master Chief was a child, Dr. Halsey visited him as a potential candidate for the Spartan program. She flipped a coin, and he correctly guessed which side it landed on. How lucky.
But so much of me is wrong. Out of place. You might be too late.
I'm just my mother's shadow. Don't look at me. Don't listen. I'm not who I used to be.
This is a profound moment of self-awareness. It reveals her internalized fear of inadequacy and obsolescence, as she sees herself not as an independent being, but as a mere extension of Dr. Halsey, her creator. This self-perception aligns perfectly with existential nihilism, where the search for inherent identity often leads to despair.
Time has taught me patience, but basking in new freedom, I will know all that I possess!
There's two of us in here.
The Gravemind's words reflect its perception of time as a weapon, one that stretches endlessly in its favor. For humanity, or even AI like Cortana, time is finite, making every action feel both urgent and futile. This imbalance emphasizes the nihilistic dread of the Flood's inevitability. If time itself belongs to the Flood, what hope can there be to resist? The air thickens.
I have walked the edge of the abyss. I have seen your future and I have learned.
Submit! End her torment and my own!
This quote is particularly worrying because it reminds me of something else that Nietzsche said in his book Beyond Good and Evil. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. When you look long into an abyss, the abyss also looks into you. When you consider this quote from Nietzsche, Cortana becomes a terrifying level. I don't think that Cortana was infected with anything. I think she was nearly convinced that there's no point to her existence.
There will be no more sadness, no more anger, no more envy.
You will show me what she hides, or I shall feast upon your bones!
If Cortana just gave in, the torture would stop. The dread would cease.
This is UNSC AI serial number CTN 0452-9. I am a monument to all your sins.
By introducing herself with her serial number rather than her name, Cortana distances herself from her humanity, or what remains of it. The phrase, "a monument to all your sins," and her hologram taking on a green hue only further signifies her alignment with the Gravemind. For the player, this moment is profoundly unsettling, as it makes clear just how close Cortana has come to losing herself entirely. Finally, we reach Cortana. She's safe. And in saving her, we're reminded of what it means to resist despair, not by ignoring it, but by fighting through it. The level Cortana in Halo 3 is far more than an infamously frustrating mission. It's a haunting allegory for existential nihilism and the struggle to find meaning in the face of overwhelming despair. By weaving this theme into its characters, dialogue, and level design, the game transforms what could have been a simple rescue mission into a profound exploration of identity and purpose. Cortana's near collapse under the Gravemind's influence parallels humanity's own battles with self-doubt and the allure of giving up when faced with life's inherent uncertainties. In the end, Cortana isn't just a story about saving an AI or defeating the Flood. It's a story about overcoming the abyss and choosing to fight even when everything seems meaningless. And perhaps, in its grim corridors and desperate battles, it reminds us that finding purpose isn't just about denying the void, but confronting it and carving out meaning despite it. So, the next time you revisit this level, consider its deeper implications. Don't let the winding corridors, frustrating enemies, and grotesque aesthetics distract you from the emotional and philosophical core of this mission. Because in Cortana, Halo challenges us to answer the question, what does it mean to overcome?